Chapter 10 is over muscle tissue, specifically skeletal muscle tissue, but we will talk about all three muscle types. So the three muscle types are skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle. When we look at muscle types, we're going to be looking at their appearance, their function, and their cell shape. Now, these muscles have a lot of similarities, but they also have quite a few differences. So the first muscle, which is the one we're going to concentrate on in this chapter, is the skeletal muscle. We can see that skeletal muscle is striated, meaning that we can see stripes in the muscle. It is multinucleated, lots of nuclei per muscle cell. We're going to find it attached to bone, and this is the muscle that helps us voluntarily move your body. Smooth muscle. Smooth muscle gets its name because it lacks striations, so it doesn't have the same internal structure as skeletal muscle. Smooth muscle is going to be found in the viscera, so your internal organs such as your stomach, intestines, kidney. And the smooth muscle is going to be involuntary, so we do not control it. And the cells are going to be tapered, which means thick in the middle, skinnier at the ends, almost like a spindle shape. The last muscle is cardiac muscle, which we find only in the heart. Cardiac muscle is going to have a very similar structural appearance to skeletal, so it is striated. However, you do not control your heart. So your heart is an involuntary muscle. Cardiac muscle cells are unique because they are branched, so they almost look like tree branches. If you look real closely, you can see that this is one muscle, cardiac muscle cell, and then it splits. And then we have these really dark lines called intercalated discs, which are specialized junctions that we will discuss in detail at the end of the chapter. Since this chapter is concentrating on skeletal muscle, what I want you to notice is this is one muscle cell fiber, but it has multiple nuclei. So that's something that makes skeletal muscle unique. So we're going to talk about how skeletal muscle is actually formed within the womb. So skeletal muscle is going to come from mesoderm, that germ tissue that we find in the middle layer. The mesoderm is going to give rise to what we call myoblasts. Myoblasts are going to be cells that actually will build muscle. The word myo means muscle, blast means to build or to create. Now, myoblasts are going to be relatively small cells, and as the fetus is developing, the myoblasts are going to continue to fuse together. The fusion of these myoblasts is going to create one very large cell. This large cell is going to be our skeletal muscle fiber, which are also the same things as saying skeletal muscle cells. Now, since we have many cells, myoblasts fusing together, we're going to have multiple nuclei in the last cell. And what I want you to also notice in this picture is that we have one myoblast left as the other myoblasts fuse together. Once those myoblasts fuse together, we're going to have our immature skeletal muscle cell. Now notice that next to the skeletal muscle cell, we do have a familiar looking cell, looks like a myoblast, but this myoblast has now transformed into what we call a satellite cell. Think about satellites in the sky. They kind of rotate around areas. They hover in positions. This is the same thing that a satellite cell does around skeletal muscles. This cell is going to stick around and help if you have any type of minor injury. It will help repair the skeletal muscle cell. Now, once we have the fusion of those skeletal muscle cells, you'll notice that we have tons of nuclei. And once this occurs, the skeletal muscle cell will lose its ability to divide. Now think about this. If you have 15 nuclei, they're each going to need to go through mitosis. Do you think it's going to be easy to get all 15 nuclei to be going through the steps of mitosis at the exact same time? If you said no, you're correct. So what happens is all nuclei become inactive when it comes to mitosis. So once your skeletal muscles fuse and are formed from the myoblast, they are losing the ability to divide. So you are born with a set amount of skeletal muscle cells. Now again, if you injure one of these skeletal muscle cells, we do have satellite cells floating around that can do minor injury repair, very minor. Anything major will usually turn into scar tissue through fibrosis. Now, when you're born, you're relatively small, 19, 20 inches, but over time you end up growing 5 feet, 6 feet, and your muscles are going to have to grow with your body. So remember I said skeletal muscles lose the ability to divide, but they can get bigger over time. What is the term for something getting larger? Think about balloons getting blown up. It's hypertrophy. So skeletal muscles have the ability to get larger, so they're hypertrophic. However, they lose the ability to divide, which means that they are not hyperplasic. Now, the other thing about muscles in the body is that they're going to have certain characteristics that are unique to them. Now remember, we are concentrating on skeletal muscles, but these characteristics will be prevalent to cardiac, smooth, and skeletal. So I call these characteristics the IDIs. There are 4 IDIs: elasticity, contractility, excitability, and extensibility. You've heard most of these terms before already, so let's do a quick review. Excitability. Notice I have lightning behind it. Basically, it's the ability to respond to and send a electrical signal. So excitability, the muscle has the ability to conduct action potentials, electrical signals. Extensibility, I have 2 fingers pulling a rubber band apart. Extensibility is the ability to extend or stretch. Now, anytime something's stretched, we want it to return to its original length, and that is elasticity. So extensibility is to stretch, elasticity is to bounce back, recoil. And then the last characteristic that muscles have is contractility. Contraction basically means to shorten with force. So muscles' main function is movement, which means that they are shortening with force when they contract. But they can still extend, which means they can still stretch. And then when they stretch, it's really important that they return back, which is elasticity. For any of this to happen, they need to respond to action potentials, and they need to be able to conduct their own action potentials, which is electrical excitability.